Good morning. This is Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. It is Tuesday, May 27th, the day after Memorial Day, which I finally got straight between that and Veterans Day. And like all good days after a 3 day or 4 day holiday, depends on who you're talking to, things are a little bit of a jumble. So we're starting just a touch late this morning, but that's okay because we're going to end early this morning because Ron has a hard stop here at 9 o'clock, as do I, because I have to get on yet another call. So, what we're going to talk about today, as we talk about every week, is funding. But we have yet another guest. So, this is going to be great. We've got a three-way party today for the first time in several weeks. So, in addition to Ron Yeager, Eric Hansen is going to be our guest. He's going to adjust his camera so we're not looking at his chin, but that's just another little aspect of the high tech way that we present this program. So, with that, as I was saying, we talk about funding every week, and we're in part four of a five-part series on fact checking. And by fact checking, we're talking about how we have enough information as a entrepreneur, an enterprise, an opportunity to share with a funding source so that they, one, know you're real, and two, like what they see, and three, like you better than everybody else. So, when we talk about fact checking, we're talking about the fact that an entrepreneur can have all the facts in the world, but anything they say is going to be viewed as potentially biased or certainly biased in their favor. And people with funding want to know that what they're hearing is true. So they want to look past this information quite often to third parties, verification, validation, certifications, or other information that puts this in context and solidifies what they're being told by the person who's pitching for funding. So, with that, we're going to talk about the fourth part in this series, which is market acceptance. We've already talked about the management team. We've already talked about the company, the entity that's bringing the opportunity forward. And last time, I talked about the technology or innovation that makes up the product or service, which somehow gives the enterprise a justification for going to market. But as we go to market, the question is, who cares? Will anybody buy this? And I was in a very pointed discussion with somebody last week where they were a little bit irate because why would somebody come to me and ask me for money if they've never sold anything that they're trying to sell? They're asking me to believe that the market's okay, everything's going to happen naturally without ever testing the market and going down that path. So, that's what we're going to talk about today. With me, I have two handsome elderly statesmen in the entrepreneurial world. And you can tell I'm in a high adrenaline rush this morning. I still need more coffee to get through today, but I have Ron Yeager, a longtime friend and associate who's working on multiple projects and bringing new technologies to market. He's also worn almost every hat that's out there. In that he's been an investor, mentor. He was at Boulder Startup Week last week, I believe it was, helping entrepreneurs move forward. And he has accumulated wisdom that you cannot put a price tag on. So, with me then this morning is priceless Ron Yeager. And then we have Eric Hansen, who basically checks all the same boxes. He's been there, done that. And like some of us, as we get older, we get a little bit more picky about what we want to see and spend our time with because we recognize that a lot of opportunities out there are not ready for funding. And in fact, some may never be funded because they'll never meet the qualifications of an investor. And so Eric brings some experience in working with funds, different corporations, international experience. just to round out the fact that we have before you, I'm going to say 120 to 140 years of experience, somewhere in there, that is ready to share with you this topic this morning. So, with that, I'm going to toss it out first to Ron to give us your understanding what it means to demonstrate market acceptance. How would you go about showing to a funding source that there is a market with a checkbook ready to buy product or service and in enough quantity that it's not just your cousin that you're asking for the information, that you're truly going to an objective source to get this information. So, good morning, Ron.
Good morning, guys. That's a good question, Carl. If I'm looking for funding, or if I'm the funder, I'll look at it both ways because this applies the same. If you have a product or service that has zero point 0.0 market and no chance of selling or anything like that, it just that's when you give up and pivot, do something different. But if I'm looking for funding, what I've historically had to do, and I've sought funding from friends and family, private equity, micro VCs, and a VC firm. So you have to have basically an MVP, some sort of product, and hopefully a proof of concept. And when you introduce that, and then also during that time, you have to have measurable progress. Even if you're not funded, you still have to maybe develop the market, your go-to market. You have to, see who the customers are, do customer surveys, things like that. And as long as you hit the milestones, and obviously the quicker you hit the milestones and you're successful at that milestone, you're de-risking your company, for the investor, because more is shown, more has been proven. That's how it works. And of course, you're going to have a hiccup or have something that'll cause you to, go off script a little bit. But that's when the real entrepreneur shows up, because they solve that issue, and it's if you ever look like a deer in a headlights as an entrepreneur, then you're kind of screwed. So, because you'll have these things that'll pop up. But that's how I do it: measurable progress, milestones, just on my own. And then if we're talking about funding, there's going to be mutually agreed upon milestones. And then at some point you have to get to your prototype. And then that changes the funding picture. It does all sorts of things. But that's the progress line that I would share.
Right. So, I'm going to ask you harder questions just
Oh,
for fun.
okay.
But you point out a couple different things that entrepreneurs to be aware of in pitching for funding and in collecting data regarding market acceptance. The first is if you're bringing a product or service to the market that's brand new, you cannot make hard assumptions that somebody's going to buy what it is because they've never seen it before. It is new. You're breaking new ground. We could use a bunch of phrases, but if you've ever had to plow a field that hadn't been plowed in 10 years, it's more of an adventure than a plow that's been plowed every year before. Nice farming, analogy that I bring from my ancient past. But the other thing you have is you're talking about a prototype, so you haven't sold one yet. So this is one of the challenges when you have an early stage company, pre-revenue, is how do you demonstrate something that's new, that's never been done before, and you're not quite fully baked as far as a product or service goes. So what would you show to an investment source that would demonstrate to them that yes, when you get done, when you hit that milestone and you have a product ready to sell, who's going to buy it? How many are going to buy it?
Right. So you're asking, how do we demonstrate that to the investors or just
Yes.
the public or the
Yeah.
users, all the above?
Or to yourself, to your own board of directors, your management team, anyone else who cares, maybe your wife or spouse, who would like for you to get a real job and quit being an entrepreneur. So, all those people have to be satisfied.
Right. And that's a whole different show, by the way. So, I have a couple examples, and I'll go through them quickly. One is a packaging product company that we started, completely different. Literally thinking outside the box for what we're putting inside the box. So the best way after months of trying to gain interest, because it was different in how it looked, it was different in how you used it. And so what we ended up doing, we did a really professional video, a split screen video, much like we have right here. We have three distinguished gentlemen right here on split screen. And so we just took a couple of the current products and then our product in the middle of the three-way split screen. And then we had a timer going on the bottom and showed how to package a box using our product versus the other things that existed that we used in that video. So when you watch that video, which was about a minute, and that was one of the points, is we could close a box quicker, tape it off, and ship it 20 seconds faster than the next product. So the throughput, productivity. And then that's what we had a word scrolling down the screen of increased productivity, zero damages, all sorts of things like that. Everyone that watched that got it right away. After we were spending months verbalizing it and drawing pictures and showing them the tangible product, they had to connect. They had to see it like that. And then Carl, the other one was interesting because there was the cleaning product that was like water, and I know you're familiar with this. And when it was being tested, I understand in the field that the people did not want to use this odorless water to clean things and disinfect things. They wanted a surfactant in there. They wanted bubbles, and they wanted to smell like lemons or oranges. So that's another example, right? Because the end users are skeptical. They're like, how does this work? It's just water. But when it's sudsy or it smells like lemon or Pledge, whatever, then that's what gets it there. So each example is different, and that's just it. You have to be creative in overcoming that. But regardless of what I say as an entrepreneur, I have to connect with whoever I'm talking with, whether it's my what'd you say, spouse? I don't have a spouse right now, but whoever I'm talking to, it has to connect, just like that's just how it works. So.
Oh, so what you're describing is you took the benefits of application of this new product or service and you condensed them into a format that was easy to see, understand, and appreciate. And as you said, everyone who saw it, immediately understood the benefits. And we're going to come back to that example in a moment, but I want to give Eric a chance to say good morning and basically pick apart everything you just said.
Perfect.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to pick it apart, but good morning. I've actually introduced multiple new products. My experience in introducing new products is very, very different because I had an existing customer base for that new product. So the way we went about it was fairly simple. First off, we had to identify a need, want, or desire. That was the number one thing. Then we went to our customer base and we said, do we solve this need, want, or desire? Now, back in a past life, we had over 600 customers. And what we did is we personally, of course, we did this anyway, but in the process of meeting with our customers, we went to them and said, will this product be sellable by you? And it was very interesting because our first product we tried to do that with was a product we've created called Pond Renew. And it was a product that you would put into your pond and it killed the algae. And yet it was still safe for animals and all that kind of stuff. We had samples. So that's the other thing is in my world, you have to have a sample and you have to do a face-to-face presentation. And so we gave them this sample, and quite frankly, it was a flop. Our own customer base, who we were already serving, said, "Yeah, we need this product. Yes, we agree." Because and most of all of these were in the farm and feed industry or golf course, right? So you'd think that these people would go, "Oh my God, this is great." No, that's not so much, because as it turns out, cleaning the person's pond is a very price inelastic concept. If you could do it for $3, they'll buy it like crazy. But if it's going to cost you $100, not so much. So that was a failure. It didn't work. But another product that we created was animal bedding, and we created several different kinds of animal bedding. And our horse bedding was fabulously successful. And interesting enough, where we were most successful was actually racetracks. So we introduced the barn, we called it Barn Dry, and we introduced it to the feed and farm guys, and they loved it. And their customers loved it because it solved the problem, right? We solved the problem for their customer. We made it cheaper and we made it better. Those were the things that had to kind of happen, right? So now suddenly you have these horse farms that were able to, instead of buying straw, which is messy, and anybody that's been around them understands it was messy. It really didn't work, didn't do the job very well, had to be cleaned every day, if not twice a day. We were able to present them with a product that was soft, fluffy. You clean it once a day max, and it was easy to pick the stall. So it was a fabulous success. And the price point was less than straw. So, or in some cases, the same. So to me, it's a little more complicated than people think, because if you don't have a need, want, or desire, you don't got a product anyway. You've got to fill that niche right out of the gate.
Yeah, so this raises a bunch of challenges for entrepreneurs who are bringing a new product to market. Because in this case, Eric, you already had an established customer relationship. You had permission to
Yeah.
present a prototype or sample of the product to them and get their feedback. And in essence, what you're doing was field testing the acceptance of this product or service. And you had the capability of making that happen because two things: you had customers and you had a sample. Okay. Um, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs are going to hit the wall, because until they have a sample and they are talking to either an existing customer or one that qualifies themselves as a prospective customer, they're not there yet. They're now doing what I call hand waving puppet shows, and sometimes accused of being smoke and mirrors, because they're going, well, we don't have it yet, but it will be cool and you will love it. But we can't show it to you because we're not done yet because we don't have the funding. So we're in the catch 22 where they're saying, I could build an awesome prototype, and I know it's going to be awesome when the customers or prospective customers see it, but I don't have one yet. So I'm gonna go back to Ron and say, Ron, when you're dealing with an innovation that is not yet at the prototype stage, so you can't show it, demo it, you can't do that for a customer and get some feedback. What do you do to create a convincing story to go to the funding people and say, I have an idea that's half baked, but not fully baked enough to create a prototype. So, how do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because it's always going to happen, almost always going to happen, in my opinion. And the way I can just tell you a story about the packaging product. I'll go back there because this is cardboard, cardboard based product, like a cereal box cardboard. And so we spent months and months down south of Denver in a town called Sedalia in a tin shed with half of a dirt floor, half of a concrete floor, using little knives, cutting out these shapes, and with real package engineers that were part of the company, that were co-founders. And so we would do this and we'd work on it a lot. And then they thought, how do we get this to the world? We have no funding yet. We have nothing. And then I thought, well, I used to work at United Parcel Service, and then I left to become an entrepreneur. So I know what, at that time, I knew what their top 10 damage claim accounts were. I know why things got damaged. And so I was in operations. And so what we did is I worked with a gentleman that I knew at UPS corporately. He was in charge of their loss prevention. And I said, I'm going to send you something and I want your opinion on it. And so we built a box. It's probably 18 inches square on each side. Filled it with material, 4 or 3 stemware glasses, wine glasses, a 7-pound rock, and 5 raw chicken eggs. And then I shipped it to the worst facilities in the country, meaning if your box goes through there, it will come out with either tire tread marks on it or footprints or a big hole in the side that has tape over it. And so I sent it to those facilities, and then the final destination was Atlanta, Georgia, United Parcel Service corporate offices. And I told this gentleman, I said, Jack, when you get this box, call me and let me know what's up. He called me at 2 a.m. And he goes, Ron, this is insane. This box has been through hell, and everything is fine. And he goes, the glasses are not broken. The chicken eggs are intact. And I said, great. I said, how's the 7-pound rock? And he goes, you know how the 7-pound rock is? And so then he goes, can you tell me more about this? And then, so it's not just bringing it to the world or making the world aware of it. It's making the right people in the world aware of it. Because Eric, much like you alluded to, you kind of you have to find their pain point. Do you solve an issue? Right. So we were solving a big issue because, the damage claim payouts for UPS, if you looked at their annual reports, they're up in the top 10 of things that they pay money for, including airplanes and fuel and employees. So we resonated with them right away. And then had the investor group marshaled. In less than a month, we raised, I think it was 2.7 million. And then I negotiated with UPS to work with UPS Mailboxes, et cetera, which is a separate company from UPS corporate. The Mailboxes, et cetera, the UPS stores, they're based in San Diego. And so I worked with them, and then we did testing in their stores. And we were bootstrapping the funding because the funding, we raised the total amount, but it came in tranches. We had to prove something to get the next tranche. And so race was on, but if I didn't have that connection or make a connection like that, who knows where this product would be, which right now it's in Asia and Europe and North America. But that was that was how that story turned out.
And again, what we're seeing is starting with a need, a defined problem that you're trying to solve, and understanding it well enough to know that your prototype was going to address this problem directly and to a significant amount. And I think that this is something that all too often we'll see entrepreneurs go, I know it's going to be accepted. I have a belief, and yet to communicate that belief in a way that somebody will give you a check to do what needs to be done gets hard. And again, in your story, Ron, you had a prototype. You worked with the engineers for a long period of time before you had something for show and tell. And during this time, you were breathing oxygen, you were eating food, and hopefully you had a roof over your head. You weren't sleeping in your car. But I know people who've gone through that scenario because there wasn't enough funding. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have a wild idea, something massively disruptive, and it's never been done before, the good news is you may solve a lot of problems. The bad news is communicating that to someone who's going to write you a check when you don't have a prototype may be difficult, if not impossible. And so there are things that can be done to try to position what you have. And I will say today, with technology, it's so much easier than it was when I started my career a while back. In that I can do simulations, I can get engineering analysis that is done on a computer that can help tell information that may be useful in sharing the story that otherwise I couldn't have done a number of decades ago. We would have had to have a physical object that we would have to put through the test in order to get to where we wanted to go. And we had as you would expect, in doing demo presentations. That's the day that the demo doesn't work. The worst one was
Oh yeah.
we were demonstrating a project, and somehow there was a short in the battery, and the whole thing caught fire on the demo table. We'll just say we did not get funding that day. So. Uh, um, Entrepreneurs who are going to do this have to think about, is there a need? Can I communicate effectively a solution that solves, what it is that's needed? And at certain stages in development of a new product or service, you're going to be short of the runway. You're going saying, I need to land this big Boeing 747, and I've got like a strip of asphalt that's long enough for the goats to walk across, but not enough to get the plane on the ground safely. And you have to start getting creative and telling your story, but you're also, in my mind, you're going to start narrowing the window of who's likely to put up money for this particular project at this early stage in development. Now, what's in some ways stranger is that entrepreneurs tend to think, well, I'm going to go to an angel investor or a PE firm or a venture capitalist to get my money for this. But these people, as smart as they are, as much money as they may hold under their control, they don't necessarily understand what you're doing. They don't understand the things that Eric described, that, one of those things that you've got to meet. And so you've got like a double-edged sword here where you're going, I need their money, but they can't understand anything I say. I'm just talking babble to them. And so you've got a greater challenge in talking to them. Whereas what Eric and Ron are both talking about is if you have a solution, maybe you should start your dialogue with a customer or prospective customer first, because at least they understand the problem. They can quantify it. They know how important it is to them. And therefore, if they get excited, if they like what they're doing, you've got two possibilities. One, they may buy it when you finish the product and it's ready for sale, but they could also strategically be a source of funding. And so from that standpoint, I often find myself setting aside these large piles of money, which are under the hands of managed capital, PE firms, family offices, the whole nine yards, because I don't want to go through the cost and time of trying to educate that funding source about something they don't know about before I go the other direction. I'd rather talk to someone who will tell me this will solve my problem. And then with that, Eric, if I know it's going to solve the problem, how would I document, verify that in a way that would be suitable for sharing with investors, whether it's the customer you're talking to or someone else? What did you do after you found that your barn dry product was excellent?
Well, when we figured out it was excellent, we went to the local horse ranches there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and then we did a demonstration of the product. From there, when that turned out to be successful, then we took the product to some of the big national horse shows, and we were fortunate enough that we had already pre-sold the organizers of this, that this was a good idea. So we took in literally tons of the product and we stacked it outside of select horse stalls. And these are expensive horses. And we're talking, these are 3-day eventers. These are not your guy that has the horse in the backyard grazing, wandering in the mud. These are prized horses, multi-millions of dollars. But because we had the invite, which gets back to what Ron was kind of talking about. If you don't have the in, you have to create the in. And you're not going to create the in unless you have substantially proven it's effective. Okay. And Ron said he did a video. Brilliant idea. Years ago, that was a really expensive thing to do. Today, you can do it on your phone. You can create the video. So, and don't try. So here's what I'm getting at. We chose to test market in very high-end situations. And that proved to be fabulously successful because it was look at them syndrome. If they're doing it, I ought to do it. And soon thereafter, we were in racetracks all over the Northwest because racehorses, those guys aren't going to be outshone by these 3-day eventers, by God. And so we instantly had volume out of that whole thing. We went from manufacturing, I think it was 200 tons for our test market, to where we were making over 20,000 tons a year of this product in very, very short order. But I also had an in, just like Ron's talking about. I had an in. If you don't have an in, create the in. And what I mean by that is, if you're making, I'll give you a real world thing that happened to me just recently. A guy came to me with a little sprinkler device, and it had all these little knobs on it for doing a drip system, and it was pretty cool. And he said to me, can we get funding for this? And because I've made this one, we did it on a 3D printer, blah, blah, blah. And I said, great. Have you gone to the people who would be selling this to see if they actually like your invention? He hadn't done that yet. What he had done is to his benefit, they had gone to landscapers. And the landscapers loved it. And he tried to build his sales program based on creating injection molding, based on landscapers putting this in. And he had a great presentation that way. And when I pointed out, you don't have the volume, it was this deflated moment. I said, who sells the most sprinkler parts on the planet? I said, you need to get into Ace Hardware. You need to get into Lowe's. You need to get into Home Depot. He said, well, I don't want to do that because, and he had all these excuses of they'll beat him up on price and on and on and on. And I said, well, the landscapers aren't going to buy in enough volume from you. You're going to have massive inventory to be able to keep it in stock. So which one's more evil? The landscaper is going to go to Home Depot if they want it, or Ace Hardware to buy it anyway, or to a specialty Rainbird store. They're going to go to those places anyway. So go to them first and see if they can sell it. And as Ron points out very clearly, they didn't have a video. They had testimonials that were written, but they had landscaper that said, oh my gosh, it saved this much water, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't have a meter set up to it to prove it. I mean, you have to have, it comes down to when you're talking about fact checking, right? It really didn't save any water. At the end of the day, it made it more convenient. And then I pointed out, I said, but there are products that are similar to yours. Yeah, but mine's electronic. You don't have a market because you have product out there that you can buy right now on the shelf. It looks different. It may not be as nifty, right? But yours doesn't save any more water than theirs does. Your big sales pitch is that each little nozzle you can tune down to that specific plant. And I said, quite frankly, the guy that has a home backyard that wants to drip feed 50 plants doesn't care. And unfortunately, they went on with their project.
Right. But
They tried.
even if they do care, because I care, about my yard, I don't make up a huge part of the market. I'm up in
Right.
this hobbyist, elevated hobbyist, but not the professional gardener, status. And I'm a very small fraction of the marketplace. So I think that you're raising a couple more issues for us to talk about. One is that who's the true customer? The person who writes you the check, which in this case would have been Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace, they're the ones buying the product. And so if you go to the landscaper, who is the consumer product, the end customer, but they're not writing the check to you, they're writing it to someone else. You've got a two-step buy-in that you have to deal with. You have to make sure
Correct.
that somebody will ultimately use the product. You also have to leave enough profit for the person who's moving the product from your shelf to a place where that person can find and buy it conveniently. And I've seen this challenge come a lot from people go online. They look, I sold the product. I go, yeah, and you've got people buying it in small quantities. But if you want to lift your volume, you have to have an intermediary, a distributor, a reseller, retailer, or something along that line. And invariably, they don't have enough profit in their product to make this work, which gets us into economics, which is next week's issue. But at the same time, last week's issue was the technology does it work? And the example you provided, Derek, is you said, well, you weren't actually saving on water. So what's the benefit? What's the need that's going to drive this product going to market? If it's just convenience for a very small fraction of the total marketplace, yeah, you may have a specialty product that you can sell as a second business or do something on the side, but it's not going to go leaps and bounds. And it's certainly not going to attract the attention of investors who are looking for the big home run when they come at this from a purely return on investment standing. I have a guest who's come online during the show. This is Omar. Omar has his own show on LinkedIn and other places. He does a bunch of interesting games with kids and help people kind of like a who's who, or here's a background bio online. It's a lot of fun. You can look up Omar on LinkedIn and see the shows he does. So a big shout out to Omar. Thanks for being with us this morning. Anyone else who's in the viewing audience, we have an open chat where you can ask questions, make comments about today's program, or seek additional information. So please use that. And Omar, thanks for being with us this morning. So the other thing is we're still got a catch-22 in that you guys keep talking about samples and product demos and so forth. And most stuff that comes across my desk seeking funding is a little bit earlier in the life cycle of that product or service or the entire business. And at the same time, it's interesting as you talk about using videos. So Eric, when these people in your first demo loved what they saw, did you create a video? Did you capture their testimonial in live form, or how did you take the information that this product worked well here to go to someone else and say, "Hey, look, it worked. Look, it worked well over there. You should try it yourself."
I gave them a ton of product, literally 1 ton of product, and said, take this to your customers. Take these to your most discerning customer who you know is going to hate this product. And they did. And those customers came back and said, wow, we used it as directed and it's saving us money. And that was the deal, right? We showed a quantifiable saving in labor for the product, and the horses liked it better. There was a different, and I know this sounds crazy, but horses know when they don't like their bedding, right? And they know. And people, if you were to say that to most people out in the world, they'd be like, "Oh, right, Hanson, you're crazy." But that's not true. They know what they like and don't like, and so we had a double whammy. Their most discerning customers were, "We love this." And then what we did is we said to not the customer, because my customer was the farm and feed store, not the horse outlet. So what I said to the farm and feed store was, okay, so now that we know that we like this, what we want to do is we want to help you promote the product to the rest of your customers. How do I get in on, because they all do the weekly flyer or the monthly flyer, whatever. I said, how can I participate in that flyer with you? Well, they all say the first thing is, if you give me $5,000 to help do the flyer, I'll be happy to do that. I said, no, we're not doing $5,000 to help on your flyer. I said, but what we will do is this. How about that for every new customer that comes in to try this, we give them 4 bags of product. And the customer looked at me and said, you'd give him 4 bags of product? I said, yeah. Well, he didn't understand that 4 bags of product, it cost me $1.50 a bag. So we gave, and 4 bags, by the way, was exactly the right amount to do a standard horse stall. So every new customer, we gave them 4 bags. They came in to buy feed. They came in to, I don't know, buy horse bits or whatever the heck they were buying. And they're at the checkout counter. The checker was told, if they haven't seen this product before, this is what give it free.
In 30 days. Have you seen this guy? You know, the one that keeps telling us to stop running on the treadmill. Well, you might want to listen to this.
Wow.
That's true. You may want to listen to this program.
So, at any rate, so that's what we did. And you know, we were in a unique position, but I would strongly encourage anybody in the business, you know, like Ron, you gave product essentially to UPS. Somehow you've got to get your customer or your potential customer to understand that you have a good product. I mean, how many products, Ron and Carl, do you see in a year that have absolutely no chance of survival? Well, it's a lot, right? And in manufacturing, you know, when you make a product, if it's software, that's a totally different game, right? But if it's a physical product, the thing that I see people forget, and I'm going to piss off some mega people, but just because you make a product and you're manufacturing it, doesn't mean anybody wants it anymore. And you have to have volume, and there's logistics. And the list goes on and on and on. So, and if you don't have those things in place, why would I fund your product? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If you came to Carl today, someone came to Carl today and said, Carl, I'm going to make sprockets. Carl, you're going to look at them and go, great. Who's your competition for the sprocket? Well, it's this guy in Taiwan, and he's making millions making sprockets. Great. Do you have the alloys to make the sprocket that they make better? What's your sales pitch? Who are you selling it to, and why are they going to buy it? And the person says, well, no, because I was told that we're going to bring manufacturing home, and we're going to start manufacturing in America. That's my pitch.
Okay, so let's stop there, Eric, because that sounds like a sixth episode, which has to do with politics, and we're probably not going to go there. Yeah,
but you guys get my point. Is that it's you have to have more to it than just the demo.
Well, right. Well, we talked about bringing a new product to market and the fact that you have to educate, you have to prove, you have to validate this, and there's different ways of capturing the information, from live demos to videos to testimonials. All these things that are stated by other people go into your book when you're trying to pitch this for money. But now the other problem we have is that some things are not new. They're basically going to step into an existing market. I got another request last week for a new energy drink. I go, you do know that there's somewhere between 400 and 600 energy drinks on the market. And oh, by the way, the Joker with the Denver Nuggets is now pumping his energy drink through King Soopers. I saw it on a point of sale display as I was checking out. And I said, you're competing against him. And as far as I recall, the Joker with the Nuggets, who this is a political statement, I think was cheated on his MVP status this year, but we will go there. The thing is, you're not him. You don't have access to this. You're not going to get a point of sale display at the cash register in King Soopers because you're not at that level. So if you're bringing a new product to market, but it's actually competitive with lots and lots of other products, how do you gain your market validation then, Ron? What would you do to distinguish yourself when you're dealing with now what looks like a commodity?
Mm-hmm. Is that to me?
It was to you, Ron. Yes, it was to you.
Very good. No, I was thinking about this because the packaging product that we introduced was introduced in an existing market with already had solutions, correct? And then the initial feedback when we started to scale up was that the cost of our product per cubic foot versus styrofoam peanuts or bubble wrap or what have you was about 5 cents more per cubic foot. So that was the first objection. And so they said, well, we're paying a lot more money for this. And so then we had to come up with the reasons why this was truly different economically and otherwise.
Yeah, next week's show.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But anyway, sorry about that.
But you're on point, is that you have to be able to answer the questions of everyone that's in your supply chain. And as Eric was pointing out, he actually had a third customer. It's called a horse, who had to sign off on this before the owner of the horse or the keeper, if it depends on how you want to use your animal relationship description. But everybody along this line has to sign off, and the more people that have to sign off, the more proof you need, the more verification that you're going to have, and you need to change your story because the horse is going, this is good, hoofs up to the owner. And then the owner is saying, this is good for me because it's convenient. The horses like it, costs me less time and money. They then tell the person they buy from, which is the supply store. And then there might even have been another link in the chain further up between Eric and what's going on. But each one is looking for a different story. If you use the same story for each of them, they're going to get confused, because if you tell the horse this is less expensive, the horse is going, who cares? The horse doesn't care that it's less expensive.
Right.
It's the owner of the horse who cares. And then even then, if it's less expensive, the person who's selling it still has to make a margin on what they sell. They're going to look at their 200, 5,000 different SKUs on the shelf of their store, and every one of them has a different profit margin for the retailer to know what they're making on that product. And if yours is the highest margin, you're going to get the greatest attention if you're moving product through the cycle. If you're doing a small volume, they still may keep you if you have high margins relative to things they sell in volume or bulk that have low margins. The sprockets, as an example, are typically going to be a low margin product because there's so much competition. So we have different stories to tell. We have to demonstrate this to the point of getting a sign off from an ultimate customer. And if we can't do that, we're going to be challenged all along the path. And if you're going to somebody that's not a customer, not in supply chain, not knowledgeable about your product, the needs for the product, how it solves a problem, and you're going to an angel PE firm, family office, now you have to educate them on the industry. You have to bring them up to a level of being competent as an ultimate consumer or someone in the supply chain going, yes, this works. And if you don't have that, then you're nowhere. You're going to be,
Right. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, Carl, you're right. It's just that a couple things, even if you get the sign off or sign offs, then if the bigger the organization is, there's going to be politics involved. It doesn't matter who signed what. And maybe they don't want to change how they do business by using this new product. Okay. That's number one. And then the back end of it too is when this is truly working and you're with a company and you're selling it, it's like I said, the sign off is great, but you want to address what is the current market. You're educating the venture people or the money people, right? It's not there's a good way of doing that. I like doing it because it occurs to me naturally. It's like, kind of briefly, where has this been? Where are we at now? But most importantly, where's the market going in the future? How does this address the future needs? And I think that's really important.
It is. Because again, investors, to be real precise, they're not investing where the business is today. They're
Right.
investing where the business is going to be 3, 4, 5 years down the road when they get their money back and a little extra. So they're not looking at their feet. They've got their eyes on the horizon. They're seeing, where do these lines converge, where your growth and the market come together at a high peak. And this is where the profits will be maximized. This is where they want to exit the investment and take the reward for having invested early. So understand where the market's going to go, because you could be the market leader today and you could be in last place tomorrow. The artificial intelligence industry right now is leapfrogging and jumping back and forth so that nobody knows who's going to be in the lead tomorrow, but that's the market as it stands. So I want to thank both of you, because I know Ron's got a hard stop. I have a hard stop at 9:00. And I appreciate your comments on going to market, proving market, validating the market, and communicating that validation so that you have a package of material. You're thinking through the progression that everyone I talk to may require a different package. It may be slightly customized or fitted to them. If I got a new demo and I've got to update everything because I have more content, I have more substance going into my story. The people who are in the market, who will be participating in the supply chain, their opinion is in some ways more important than that of everybody else, because if they don't join in bringing this product or service to market, it ain't going anywhere. So all good things. So Ron, any last comments before you have to jump?
Yeah, just real briefly. In 1996, the U.S. Congress they passed the Telecommunications Act that said that every new TV sold in the future, starting the next year with televisions up to 19 inches, had to have the V chip in it. Okay, that's the parental kiddie control chip, right? That was in 96 it passed. And then I think by 98 or whatever, that's when they had to start implementing it. I looked around and only one company made a V chip back then, Soundview Technologies. So they went from being nothing to being they're a penny stock company to being just really amazing overnight. When Congress passed that, they didn't look and examine what types of technologies will address this. They just said, we want this to happen. Then the market came open. Soundview Technologies had the IP, the patents, and they went crazy after that. So it doesn't matter where you're at, what you're doing. You got to look at what is going to influence the sale of your product going forward. Now, if Congress votes that your company is the only one that you can use, that's a good thing. So
yeah, so those of you who invested in penny coin wrappers, you may want to rethink your long-term strategy. So, Eric, any last comments for our audience today?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff, and the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur, especially an inventor, are just going to get harder as education and as we have to re-implement old ideas. You have to have the better mousetrap. I mean, how many brand new things can you have, right? And I don't. Yes, ingenuity is great in this country. There is no doubt about it. But like I like to say to people, if I'm thinking about it, somebody else is already doing it. And that's probably from an inventor standpoint. I know that they don't want to hear that, but you have to be quick and you have to be light on your feet, just like Ron said. And if you're not, you don't have a chance because someone else is already doing it. That would be my message.
I mean, if there's a need in the market, an entrepreneur or many entrepreneurs will step up to address that need one way or another. And you have to be prepared to communicate what you created in a way that people can understand it and even to a higher level so people can fund it. So thank you, Ron and Eric, for being with me this morning. I'm going to turn you loose so you can get on with your day's business. Next week, we're going to talk about the economics of fact-checking or fact-checking economics. Can you make a profit, or is this just kind of interesting question? So we'll see you all next week on the Successful Funding Show.
All right. Thanks, Carl.